Now, Nebraska Republican refused to say whether or not all Americans were entitled to food. You know, that thing that we need to survive. Now, this is Representative Adrian Smith. Now, he recently appeared on Saturday's NPR's Morning Edition, where he had discussed the Farm Bill, farm subsidies, and food stamps, which would, of course, be cut under a budget proposed by President Trump. Now, host Scott Simon had asked Smith whether or not he believed that every American was entitled to eat. And look, I think that this should not be a tough question to answer, but let's listen to Adrian Smith's response.
Well, let me ask you this bluntly. Is every American entitled to eat?
Well, the nutrition, obviously, we know is very important, and I would hope that we can look
well, not just important, it's essential for life. Is every American entitled to eat?
It is essential. It is essential.
So is every American entitled to eat? And is food stamps something that ought to be that ultimate guarantor?
I think that we know that given the necessity of nutrition, there could be a number of ways that we could address that.
So you would vote for a budget that cuts food stamps?
I want to look at an entire budget, look at all of the details. I'm still sifting through the details of the newly released budget, but we know that Congress ultimately has the say. Mm-hmm. I look for there to be a lot of changes made in the House and the Senate to the president's budget.
Okay, so that's your standard politician response, right? To a question that should be relatively straightforward. In fact, that is the most straightforward question I've ever heard. Is every American entitled to food? Yes! The answer is yes. You shouldn't even have to think about this, okay? This is like asking, hey, is every American entitled to breathe clean air? Yes! Yes, it is! Yes, it is! It happens to be that you need both to survive, okay? It is a biological human process that is necessary for life. Yes, you need food. And I think that everybody should have the basic necessity. This basic necessity, they should have access to it for survival. Why is this a hard question? Why is this a hard question? Look, I'm not talking about everybody gets entitled to steak and lobster every night. Okay, no, I'm not saying that. And besides, you talk to people on food stamps, ain't nobody on food stamps eating steak and lobster, buddy. Or shrimp or anything, or any of that nice stuff, okay? No. Look, the average food stamp recipient gets about $132 for a benefit. That is not very much. And that is on a monthly basis. They are not living high on the hog. And not only that, but most food stamp recipients are children, the elderly, disabled adults. And the ones who are not in those above categories, over 30% of them actually also work and still receive food stamp. This whole idea of cutting the SNAP program, this is social Darwinism. And when you can't answer the simple question, is every American entitled to actually have food? Then you are buying into that social Darwinism. Because you're basically saying, or well, by omission, you're basically admitting that, yeah, I don't believe that everybody should have food. I mean, only people who can afford to buy food should have food. If you can't afford to buy food, well, sorry, man, sad day for you. But then it goes back to what they think about people that are on food stamps. They think, and there's this popular perception that, well, if you just stopped buying iPhones and you stopped buying all this fancy stuff, well, you could feed yourself. Unfortunately, that's not reality. Reality that there's a lot of food insecure households in America. But you have people like Fox News, and you go back to this famous segment where Stuart Varney went around saying, oh, look at all these poor households. So-called poor households. They actually have a microwave. They actually have a refrigerator or a laptop. They're not actually poor. Yeah, but in the American context, they are poor and they are food insecure. Social Darwinism. This is exactly, this is a good example of that. Refusing to actually say that Americans are actually entitled to eat if they're poor. Republicans, man, this is what they believe in. They would rather that people not guarantee people food, access to food, in order to give their donors giant tax cuts. That's the whole end game. That's what this is always about. It's about, hey, man, I would rather give money to my donors, because that's what they give me campaign bribes to do, than make sure that poor families in America actually have access to nutrition and actually have these programs to be able to help them. It's not about self-sufficiency. It's not about getting people to work. Again, most of the people that receive food stamps are unable to work because they are either old, disabled, or children. What are you going to do? Make the kids get a job? Hey, kids, go back to the factory like we did in the 1920s. That's their solution. It's not a realistic solution. And again, it's going after the poor. It's demonizing the poor, and it's trying to basically show that the poor people are not moral human beings, and that they don't deserve the basics of survival. And cruel is only one of the words that you could come up with to describe that mentality. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.